All right. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate it. This is the third part in my presentation series of Your Laptop's Midlife Crisis, How to Help It Cope. Parts 1 and 2 were presented at the previous two APCUG VTCs, so you can, if you didn't see them before, check out the recordings. Part 1 was adding RAM to your laptop, and part 2 was upgrading your laptop's hard drive. So this will be dealing with another thing to help your laptop cope with its midlife crisis. Because your laptop can have a midlife crisis just like you can. The problem is when we have our midlife crises, we can handle them in a constructive or not so constructive ways. So you might ask yourself, what is a midlife crisis? For those of you that are out there that are younger and haven't reached your midlife yet, what does that really mean? Well, those that are older and listening, you probably know when you reach a point in life, sometimes you find that you can't do all the things that you used to do or that you'd like to do. Things are a little bit more difficult. You can't remember how to do something, or you're just not capable of doing some things that you want to do. Your laptop can be the same way. When it's early in its life, it seems like it's got lots of capabilities, but as time goes on, it may slow down, or the technology world around it is advancing, and it doesn't do the things that you, the user, wanted to do. Now, you, the user, when you have a midlife crisis, you might do some less than useful things, like maybe buy a red sports car or dress inappropriately for your age, but you could choose to cope by doing something productive, like taking classes or something like that to help you improve yourself. And this presentation is here to help you help your laptop get through its midlife crisis, because it's relying on you. So what is the lifespan of a laptop? How do you know whether your laptop is even ready for a midlife crisis? If it's brand new, then you don't have to worry too much. And if it is running XP or something like that, maybe it's past its lifespan. But you need to determine if there's an issue and then go from there. So when you buy new hardware, and I'm talking new hardware, not maybe something you bought used or from your friend, but something that's currently in stores. Hardware is typically current for about 2 years. You buy a new computer, and the usefulness of it, the current hardware configuration, lasts about 2 years. After a couple of years, they'll be coming out with some new interface or some new capability, and then maybe it's not the latest thing, but you've got the latest thing for a couple years, and you can probably expect about 4 years of reliable operation with no repairs on average. But if you take care of your laptop, it could run for 10 years or more without problems. But its useful life, what I would say is useful life, is typically about 5 years. But this, of course, is going to vary depending on what you bought when you initially made your purchase. If you were buying the cutting edge, latest, greatest, most expensive hardware you could at the time, then that's useful life is going to last a little longer. It's going to take a little while before something comes out that really makes you think this is not as good as it used to be. But if you instead bought the cheapest, the bargain basement laptop with the least capabilities, the budget machine, then it might not take as long for you to decide, well, gee, it's not so capable. Hopefully you didn't decide that 2 weeks afterwards, but hopefully you're fairly satisfied to use it about 5 years. So on that regard, the life of a laptop might be 10 years, and its midlife might be about 5 years. Another rule of thumb I use is it's probably good for the useful life of the installed operating system. So if your operating system is no longer supported, then the laptop that you have that originally had that operating system on when you bought it may have passed its useful life. For example, I have two Fujitsu laptops. One is a Lifebook AH531, which I bought new in September of 2011. So it's now 5 years old. It's certainly reached its midlife. It's got a 15.6-inch display, Intel i3 processor. It's adequate. I bought it for my wife. She doesn't do a lot of sophisticated computing on it, so that's been fine for her, and she wanted a larger display. I also bought myself an LH531 Fujitsu laptop. It's the machine that I'm displaying this presentation on right now. I bought it in middle of 2012, so it's about 4.5 years old. So it's certainly getting close to midlife, if not reached there. It's a 14-inch display because I prefer a little smaller machine, but it's got a more powerful processor. Both of these originally came with 500 gig hard drives, 2 gigs of RAM, USB 2, HDMI, which was pretty good interface for its time to have on these laptops 5 years ago. That was just coming out on computers. Gigabit wired Ethernet, reasonable Wi-Fi, a DVD-RW drive, a camera for video chat and that, and it originally came with Windows 7. That's what all of these, or that's what these computers came with originally. And so they, have to deal with the midlife crisis based on just that hardware. So what have they got going for them? Is it to the point where 5 years in, I want to say, well, I'll just get rid of these and get something else? Or is there some useful life to them? I want to, extend their life. So they're still fairly fast, and they still have most current interfaces. It would be nice to have USB 3, hint, hint. They've got a good operating system, and Windows 7 as the operating system is still going to be supported by Microsoft for security updates till, I think, 2020. So I've still got 4 years or so left on them. In that regard, I could have upgraded them to Windows 10, but I decided not to. But Windows 7 will be supported for another 4 years, so there's still life left in them. And they appear to be reliable. I've not had any issues that would cause me to think that they're going to fail. I've tried to keep them maintained, but so far so good. But what do they lack? Well, they didn't have a lot of RAM in them, and if you want to go view the VTC from 2 VTCs ago, the recorded, you can see how I added more RAM to both of these laptops and improved their situation that way. So I've already done that on these. They lacked a larger hard drive. 500 gig was not that big, and at that time there weren't any solid state drives. But if you go view the VTC presentation I did last VTC 3 months ago on recording on the APCUG website, then you'll see how I added both larger and more capable hard drives to these laptops. I put 1 terabyte drives in, which were what they call a hybrid drive, which is a rotating magnetic platter drive that comes along with some solid state memory built into it, kind of as a cache. So it has the best of both worlds. It has larger space for a reasonable price and improves the access time by using that cache of solid state memory in the same package. Of course, these laptops, as I said, also lack USB 3. And in this presentation, we will talk about that. And Blu-ray is another capability that's out there. It's been out there for a little while, that you could also add to your laptop. Blu-ray is pretty easy to do. You can add an external Blu-ray drive. So what are the most popular laptop upgrades? Well, the ones I've done are in my book here at the top of the list: more memory, larger hard drive or solid state drive, add a faster interface like the USB 3 interface. If all you've got is USB 2. If you didn't have gigabit Ethernet and you had other gigabit Ethernet components in your network that you could take advantage of, adding that would be useful. If your Wi-Fi is not the most current configuration, you could add better wireless. HDMI output is always nice. If you have a large TV you want to connect your laptop up to show pictures or things like that, if you don't have a smart TV, but it does have an HDMI input. Blu-ray, as I said, is a good upgrade that's not too expensive to do. Just buy yourself an external Blu-ray USB drive, and USB 2 is fine for that if you can't add USB 3, and then you can watch your Blu-ray movies. I put new battery on here with an asterisk. It's not really an upgrade, but once your laptop reaches midlife and you've been using your laptop offline power with just the battery a lot, you might find that your existing battery is getting a little flat, doesn't hold as much of a charge, and you run out of power when you're using it a little quicker than you remember. So a new battery, replacement battery, might be a useful thing, and there's lots of aftermarket direct replacement batteries you can buy for a reasonable price that will give your laptop a new lease on life too. So why add USB 3 to a laptop? If you've just got USB 2, what's the advantage? Well, there are two main advantages to USB 3. One significant advantage is faster transfer rate. With USB 2's transfer rate of 480 megabits per second, the USB 3 rate is 5 gigabits per second. Considerable transfer rate difference. In addition, USB 3 is full duplex, whereas USB 2 is half duplex. Now, some of you may not know what that really means. What it means is the ability to communicate in two directions in full duplex versus half duplex, where one person can only talk at a time, and then you have to change because you're using one communications channel. If you've got a landline phone, and maybe some of you still do like I do, it's a full duplex situation, as long as the phone company's not having problems, and you can be listening to someone talking to you on the phone line, and you can say something and it doesn't interrupt your audio, the audio you're hearing of them. You can talk right over them while still hearing them. I've had some cell phone conversations though where I'm convinced the connection is not too good, and if I interject over someone when they're talking, which isn't a polite thing to do, but you may have to say, all of a sudden I've got to do something, you find that their audio is cut off. That's a half duplex situation where only one person in the link can communicate at one time. And we'll talk about why that's an advantage in this, but obviously being able to communicate in both directions is better than only one direction at a time. The other main advantage to USB 3 is higher current. Out of your USB ports, I'm sure you found you can do all sorts of things in addition to communicating through them, like charge batteries of devices and things like that. And USB 2 spec will allow 500 milliamp current out of each USB 2 port. The USB 3 spec has increased that to up to 900 milliamps of current out of each port. What that means is you can support devices that require more current, or you can potentially charge devices or batteries at a faster rate. For a lot of devices, it doesn't really matter a little USB flash drive or something like that, but there are some things like external USB hard drives that have real hard drives inside the case. When those originally came out and were used with only USB 2 because USB 3 didn't exist, they'd often have to have a little wall wart power adapter you'd plug into your outlet and plug into this drive to power the drive, because the USB 2 connector with only 500 milliamps of current couldn't supply enough current to spin the drive and run all the electronics in that box. Then later, I've got some of these little smaller USB hard drives. They're in a 2.5-inch format like you'd have in a laptop, but they still required more power than one USB 2 port would supply. So it had a cable that had two USB plugs at the host end, so that you would have to plug it into two USB ports on your laptop. Only one would do the data transfer, but the other one was there to supply the extra power. Thus, it didn't need that external wall wart for power, but did require two connectors because it needed more than 500 milliamps of current. But with the advent of USB 3, I haven't seen that much. It's now one cable, and your USB drive can run off of that because it will now be able to get 900 milliamps out of that USB 3 connector. There's lots of USB 3 devices that are available at this point. So if you've just got USB 2, you might find that you've got a lot of USB 3 devices sitting around if you've been buying flash drives or external hard drives already. They've now become the norm. So you may as well take advantage, if you can, of the additional speed and capability you'll get by adding a USB 3 interface to your laptop, so that you can utilize those USB 3 flash drives and external drives that you've already bought. The other advantage is USB 3 is backwards compatible to all the other versions that came before, USB 2 and USB 1.1. They're all designed to be interoperable with each other at the connection level, even though they run at different speeds and provide different currents. The main connector, the USB standard rectangular connector you'll find on a laptop or desktop or other controlling device, are compatible. And through handshaking or communication between the two devices over that link, they negotiate and set the link to operate at the capability of the lowest link version. So that if you've got a USB 3 flash drive that you've bought because that's pretty much what you can buy, but your laptop still only has USB 2, you can still use it, but the transfer speed will only be at a USB 2 rate. To get that USB 3 speed, you'll need both the device that you're storing data on and the controller, the laptop, to be USB 3. Conversely, you can still use your old USB 2 devices with a USB 3 interface. They'll just negotiate and determine that the device that's being used is a slower speed, and it will still, again, only run at the USB 2 rate. These are the connectors that you would see for USB 2 and USB 3. As you can see, USB 3 added 5 pins in the standard connector, but it's still compatible mechanically and can be used with USB 2 connectors and vice versa. The USB 2.0 4-pin connector has 2 power pins. The minus is the ground and the plus is the plus 5 volts, and then 2 data lines, the D plus and the D minus. And this is transferring data in a serial fashion using differential signaling, and that is having the same information sent on both lines, with one line being true or positive sense and the other side being negative or inverted sense. So if it's sending a bit of information with highs and lows, one side is high, when the other is low, and they're always opposite. That provides better signal integrity over the cable that it's being sent over, but it does require 2 pins to do that. But at the high speeds that are required, they do need to have that, that redundancy. Now in USB 3, as you can see, those 4 pins are still there, pins 1, 2, 3, and 4 down below, with the power, the 2 data, D plus and D minus data lines, and the ground. And now the other advantage I'll talk about with USB 3 and its full and half duplex, when you're transferring files with USB 2, what it's got to do is send a request from your laptop over those 2 D plus, D minus lines to the memory to request data, and then it turns the bus around, and now the memory device that you have plugged into your laptop has to send the data over those 2 same lines. Now, typically it may not have to, send a request that often as compared to the amount of bits it's sending over, but it's still having to have that turnover time to switch directions. In USB 3, they eliminated that with the addition of having 2 pairs of differential lines for data transfer, and those 2 pairs are a higher quality connection, better wire connection, so they can run at a higher transfer rate. So as you can see, there were 5 pins that were added, 5 through 9 in the top of that USB 3 pin that are back behind the other 4 pins, and those only get connected on USB 3 devices. USB 2 devices would not see those, so it's still compatible with the port, but it's got a TX pair, the TX plus and minus differential pair, and then on the left side, the RX differential pair plus and minus, and then an additional ground pin in the middle. And this allows them to send data out on the transmit as it's receiving data in on the receive lines. So it can request data and get data at the same time, and that speeds things up a little bit too. Now, you might think, how do I add USB 3 to a laptop? Well, if you had a desktop, you could go find a USB 3 PCIe card to put into your desktop, but you really can't do that with a laptop unless you've got what's called an express card interface in your laptop. It's a interface that is available on some laptops. It had to have been built with it. You can't add it. That is a high-speed bus connection for your laptop. It's defined by a standard developed by PCM-CIA, which is the Personal Computer Memory Card International Organization. It's a trade group that standardized this type of interface for use with laptops so that laptop manufacturers could put this in, and peripheral card makers could make these cards, and they would be compatible. So it's a slot that's built into your laptop, which accepts these expansion cards. You can see a picture of one. They're up in the upper right corner. There are 2 form factors that are defined by this standard, and they are defined by the width of the card, 34 millimeter wide and a 54 millimeter wide. The one that's shown there is the 54 millimeter wide. It has kind of an L shape. The 34 millimeter wide would be just that long part. It would be a card that just looks like that. If you lop that little leg that comes off, that would be what a 34 millimeter card would look like. In fact, here's a slide that shows them together, the 34 millimeter card and the 54 millimeter card, compared to what used to be a laptop interface standard, the card bus slot. It used to be, before Express Card came out, they had things called card bus, and I've got a old laptop that I think ran Windows 98 that had a card bus slot in it. You could add interfaces. I think I maybe added when USB 2 came out at all, added a card like that. So this is the successor to that type of interface, the Express Card. And there are a lot of different express cards that you can buy to add different capabilities. You can add both USB 3 and USB 2 if you didn't have any USB. You can add Ethernet ports, wired Ethernet ports. There are actually solid state drives that are you can add, and wireless NIC cards, TV tuner cards, sound cards, and these range in price from about $9 to $200. They are hot pluggable. You can unplug and plug with the laptop powered. They install with a push-in, push-out interface like an SD memory card. If you, whoever put those in, or you press it in and it will click, and then you release and it backs out a little bit, but it's now installed. Then to take it out, because it may be in a flush situation, you press it in a little more till it clicks, and then it will have a spring that forces it out enough so that you can pull it out. You'll probably need drivers and possibly software to run this new card. But because it's got this SD card-like spring carriage interface, there are some issues that the card can get pulled out accidentally. It doesn't have any locking mechanism that would prohibit it from being pulled out or ejected accidentally. If you're pushing a USB drive into it and you push too hard and it triggers the card to eject, then the whole thing comes out. Because it's hot swappable, that doesn't hurt anything, but it can be annoying. So in my laptops, for example, the AH531, the larger one my wife has, does have an express card 54mm slot. So I could add USB 3 to that laptop. The LH531, the one I'm using right now, it has no express card slot because it's a smaller case, and I guess they determined they couldn't fit it in. I had to sacrifice that for size. So there's no way for me to add USB 3 on this laptop. I've got to put up with USB 2. Now, if you have a express card slot, you might think, what kind of USB 3 card should I get? When I did this presentation last year originally, there were 9 different cards that you could buy on Amazon, ranging from $12 to $42 that would add USB 3. Number of different kinds available. They had a dual port 34mm flush mount, which is the top left one you see, a dual port 54mm flush mount, and a single port 34mm flush mount. Now, what flush mount means is it ends up being flush with the edge of the laptop case when you put it in. They also had non-flush, which you can see the 2 lower ones, a dual port and a quad port. It's got this bulbous piece that comes out of the case, sticks out, allows it to have something to hold on to so you can more easily plug the USB connectors into it, but it does have this thing hanging out that kind of can get in the way. The flush mount is nice in that regard. So this is what I did when I decided I was going to upgrade my wife's PC. Now you'll note it says initial purchase. Initially I thought, well, I'll buy this low-cost, no-name, dual-port 54mm flush mount USB 3 adapter. It came with most everything, but it had no manual or instructions or a web URL that I could look at for help. It took some doing. I had to read reviews online to find out how other people were able to use it. And I was able to successfully load the drivers finally, but it took some work and experimentation. And everything seemed to be working fine till I tried transferring large files, and then it gave me errors. So I found that being budget conscious didn't work out so well in this case, and then made a second purchase, which was more name brand StarTech 2-port 54mm flush mount. It cost 3 times as much, but came with a manual, had a URL for the website to get support, but I found I didn't need any support. It worked fine, installed easily, and so it was worth the extra money. Now, the upgrade process for using this card was to remove the express card cover plug, you'll find when you have a slot like this on your computer that you've not put anything into, it comes with a plastic plug to keep dirt out of that express card slot, and you press it in the same way as a card and it will pop out. And then you install the new USB 3 express card. They say to ignore any system messages you get on your machine and put the CD that comes with it in and run the appropriate exe file for the model number that you're installing. And then you can verify that it works by installing a USB drive and checking the transfer speed. This USB 3 adapter has a couple of interesting features. Its USB 3 ports are flush mount, and it has an optional power cable to provide additional USB 3 power. Now, the express card slot apparently doesn't provide enough current to supply two 900 milliamp USB 3 outputs at the same time. So it's got this connector and cable that you would plug into either an external power adapter or another USB 2 slot on your laptop. Obviously, plugging it into the one on this adapter would not get you anything. And then it will draw 500 milliamps, up to 500 milliamps out of that to supply more current for your USB 3 connections. The issues that you can have with these, as I said, if you insert a device into this express card too far and too hard, it can accidentally eject the express card. If you pull on a device that's kind of binding, it can accidentally pull the USB express card out. But those aren't real issues, except they can be annoying. The express card does draw power when it's not being used. So if you're used to using your laptop for battery operation and you're not planning to use USB 3 interface, you might find it would be useful to unplug that express card, take it out of your laptop so that it saves your battery power. And I found that on some devices, especially external little flash drives, the speed increase didn't seem that great over on USB 3. So I did some transfer tests, and I found that I found that the speeds, it was very interesting. This is a test you can do with any computer. You just got to be methodical, and what you need to do is transfer a given file size, and you want to find a large file, like a backup image file, to transfer between different devices on different ports. And you want it to be large because you can then time how long it takes to transfer this file. And you want something that's large so that the time is about maybe a minute, because that gives you a more accurate reading if you're transferring just a little JPEG file or something, and you've got to click the stopwatch button too fast. It's hard to get an accurate reading. If it's a long time, like about a minute, then the inaccuracy error of clicking on and off the stopwatch is a smaller percentage of the measurement time. So what I did was I got a USB 3 external hard drive and a USB 3 flash drive and USB 2 flash drive. And I tested it with my wife's new USB 3 express card. I tested both the USB 3 port and the USB 2 port. So these are the devices I used for the test. And here are the results. I initially tried the USB 2 flash drive. I tried both directions, transferring the file both from the PC, writing it to the external device, and then reading a file back of the same size. And I found with the USB 2 device, flash drive, plugged into the USB 3 port, it took about 3 minutes, or 3 minutes 53 seconds, about 4 minutes to write that file to that flash drive, but only took about a minute to read it back. And the only thing I can see is that it must take, with this type of flash memory in the flash drive, it must take longer to write than to read. I plugged the same device into USB 2 and found it was very close in terms of time. So the USB 3 was operating at USB 2 speeds. Then I took a USB 3 flash drive and plugged it into the USB 3 port, and it did write a lot faster, but the read time was not significantly improved. Plugging it into the USB 2 port, I found the times were about the same. So the only thing I can conclude there is the time it takes to read and write the flash memory in these USB flash drives is fairly large as compared to the transfer rates that you get over the interface. So that's really what's the limiting factor is. Because then I did a test with a USB 3 hard drive, and you can see the times dropped dramatically to transfer the same file, mind you, and the USB, with the USB 3 in USB 3 flash drive, it was 1:13 to read or to write, whereas it was 22 seconds with the hard drive, external hard drive. And I found that, yes, there was a difference in using USB 3 hard drive in USB 3 slot versus USB 2 slot on the laptop. So you can see there's a difference of 22 seconds versus 55 seconds for the USB 2. So it did save, a third the time, but you're maybe only going to see this if you're transferring large files a lot. Now I've got a video that I want to show that provides more information about it and explains the process even better.
Hi, this is Greg Skalka with the Under the Computer Hood User Group, San Diego, California. I'm going to be demonstrating how you can add a USB 3 port to a laptop that originally only came with USB 2 ports. This is a Fujitsu AH531 laptop. It has a 15.6-inch screen and 3 USB 2 ports. But it also has something that will allow us to add additional ports, including USB 3, and that is an express card slot. Express card is a standardized port that's offered on some laptops, including this one. It connects to a high-speed bus internally on the laptop. It has this cover on the laptop originally. If you press in and release, it allows you to remove it. It's a little dummy card cover which covers up the slot in the laptop. This will allow us to add an express card device that will give us USB 3 ports. This is an express card USB 3 dual adapter. It provides 2 USB 3 ports on this end. This is a 54 millimeter express card adapter, which means it's 54 millimeters wide. This laptop can also accommodate the other type, which is a 34 millimeter adapter, 34 millimeters wide. The 54 has a 34 millimeter end here, and the total width is 54. Express card devices are very easy to use as they are hot pluggable. That means you can plug them in to the laptop even when it's powered. To install it, you simply insert it into the slot in the laptop and then press in till you hear the click and then release, and it locks in. It locks in similar to an SD card, which has that same type of locking mechanism. You press it in until it clicks into the carriage, and then it comes back a little bit and is locked in, installed. To remove the express card, you press it in till you hear the click, and then release, and its spring-loaded carriage will push it out so you can then remove it. To install a device, follow the instructions from the manufacturer. For this type, from StarTech, the instruction said to install the express card in the laptop, ignore any warnings that Windows would put up, put the device driver CD into the drive on the laptop, and run the appropriate executable program to install the drivers. It's as simple as that. This type of USB 3 adapter is called a flush adapter because the connectors are flush with the side of the laptop once the express card is installed. To use it, simply insert a drive like this flash drive into the card, and it's recognized just like any other USB port would recognize a drive. To remove the drive, eject the drive through your operating system the way you would normally with any other USB device, and then carefully pull the drive out of the adapter. When removing the drive, you do have to be careful so that you don't pull the express card out with it. Because if you do that, then you've disconnected everything. It is hot pluggable, so you really don't damage anything, but it can be a nuisance. This adapter has two USB 3 ports. So you can install two devices into it at the same time. This express card also comes with a power cable which plugs into this small circular connector in the middle between the two USB ports. It's intended to plug into another USB port or USB power adapter. So I could plug it into this one on the laptop here. What this does is provide additional power for these two USB 3 connectors so that devices that draw more power can be supplied by it. It supplies more power than just the bus for the express card can provide by itself. With the USB 3 express card adapter installed in this laptop, I can now access two different high-speed USB 3 devices at their full normal speed. Express card slots are not available in all laptops, however. I also have a Fujitsu LH531, which is a 14-inch screen. It's a smaller laptop. It doesn't have an express card slot, so I can't find any way to install USB 3 on that laptop. But for this one, it's a successful installation and works well. There are other express cards that you can buy to provide other interfaces and even TV tuner cards and other things like that.
So now you've seen it in real life filmed. And once you've added your new USB 3 capability to your laptop will feel better about itself, and you'll be able to do new things too. These are the references for the information I used in this presentation. Again, I'm Greg Skalka with the Under the Computer Hood User Group in San Diego. If there's any questions that John's gotten at this point in time, we can address those. If you find that you had questions that never got addressed, you can certainly email me at president@uchug.org.
I will let you know that you